There is an unavoidable flaw in graduate education. Hey, I am Chuck the bureaucrat, and you guys remember that Major Riley came to the Pentagon from a graduate program in operations research. And even though he did really well in school, his first year back in the real world, if you can call the Pentagon the real world, well, it hasn't been stellar. He's doing good. He's learning the ropes. His senior rater knows him and trusts him to do routine business. But when it comes to the really, really important things, Major Riley is still second string. The good news is, well, there's actually two good things, right? Number one, Major Riley is an operations research kind of guy. He likes figuring out how things work and why. And number two, he's been invited back to his alma mater to talk to next year's crop of graduating students. That has him thinking about what's really going on, and he's coming to some important conclusions. He's realizing that grad school distorts problem solving. You see, in grad school, every problem that they give you has already been solved. Examples, homework, test problems, they've all been solved, and they're going to get solved again by the whole class. These problems are like old, well-worn shoes. You flip open a test and you know that the problems can be solved in the time available with the techniques that have been taught in that class. Sure, the problems might be hard, but deep down, the student knows that they can be solved. It ain't like that at the Pentagon. When somebody hands you a problem, it has not been solved. Otherwise, it wouldn't even be a problem. There's not that confidence that it can be solved, never mind with the time and tools available. And just as an aside, a Pentagon problem statement is pretty crappy compared to a textbook problem statement. You know a homework question contains all the information you need to solve it. That never happens in reality. The next distortion has a lot to do with the previous one. Whenever your professor hands you a problem or demonstrates something, they use a curated data set that has specifically been selected to demonstrate the technique they're trying to teach you. Now, there are good practical reasons for doing this, but these hand-picked data sets come with at least two distortions. Probably the most obvious distortion is that these hand-selected data sets make the techniques seem more powerful than they would be against like a free-range data set. That can lead a new analyst to select a technique that they think is very powerful and then go looking for a data set when it should probably be the other way around. The other distortion caused by these custom data sets is that the student rarely appreciates the time and effort that went into finding the data and getting it into the right format. Now, to be fair, most professors address this distortion, and it makes a lot of sense that you wouldn't invest all that time-consuming labor in finding and building data sets, but students still tend to underestimate how much work it's going to take. The issue is when a new action officer gets asked by his boss, who is not an analyst, how long is this analysis going to take? The analyst tends to answer the question, how long will the analysis take once you have the data? He doesn't know how long it's going to take to get the data, and so he tends to underestimate, underdeliver, and get off on the wrong foot. The next distortion is kind of obvious, but it's impossible to overstate its importance. General officers are not professors. There is a radical difference between your Pentagon boss and your grad school boss. Your professor wants you to learn a technique. Your general wants you to make a problem go away. Your professor wants to see that you understand the details of the technique. The general could care less about the technique. The professor knows the answer. The general officer doesn't know the answer. In fact, if he did know the answer, he wouldn't even ask you. So the way that you have to communicate shifts overnight. And to be fair to the professors, it's very difficult to simulate that change in communication. Even if they bring in an operationally minded general officer or a colonel to receive final briefs, that person tends to be in a good mood. They feel honored to be shaping young minds. They're out of their office, and they know not a single issue that they're going to discuss today really matters or will come back to bite them in the future. And so these guests have a hard time capturing the urgency and the frustration and the intensity that they're going to demonstrate in their own offices. And like I said, it is hard to understate the difference between professors and general officers, but these last 2 points deserve really important attention. Your military bosses are going to be interested in the results you can produce and not the journey you went on to get them. They trust that you did the analysis, and if they have questions about it, they're going to ask you. But if you've only got 30 minutes with them, you don't want to waste it with 29 minutes explaining how you got there. Understanding what they really want, well, that can take time. And until you actually understand that, it can be disorienting. And finally, there is a huge difference between how you are evaluated in grad school and in the military. I mean, in the grad school, it's all about grades, A, B, C, right? In the military, it's all about evaluations with a forced distribution. In grad school, you're evaluated where everybody is doing the same tasks, but in the military, almost everybody is working on some different type of problem or aspect of a problem. The whole point of your grades is to signal your potential for higher education, whereas the whole point of your evaluations is to signal your potential for promotion. And so those are entirely different measures. In grad school, you had a syllabus that laid out exactly how you were going to be evaluated. It told you the tasks, their relative weight, and when they were due. In the military, if you get an initial counseling at all, they're not going to give you some kind of point scale that they're going to use to evaluate you. Your senior rater probably doesn't even know everything that's going to crop up over the course of the next year, and in fact, it's those things that crop up unexpected that really give you your chance to shine. Now, this might seem like some kind of catastrophic problem that somebody should be doing something about. But who? The generals, the colonels? You're there to help them, so you have to adapt to their needs. Your professors? Well, a lot of their focus is on transferring as much knowledge to you as they can in the limited time they have available. And if that contributes to some of these distortions, is it really their fault? In fact, if anybody has responsibility in this turbulent transition, it's the student who's becoming the action officer. In fact, I would argue that the big final test of graduate education is your ability to transition back into the workforce. Plus, there's some good news. The Pentagon sees hundreds of people just like you every year. Your colonel or GO, they might not be familiar with this process, but there are hundreds, even thousands of career civilians who have seen your story play out over and over. They can give you a lot of perspective and guidance, and I'm going to give you one of the things that they inevitably say when you show up. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because most grad students, when they hear this, they reject it. Oh, that's not going to happen to me. The advice is, it's going to take a year to get your feet firmly on the ground at the Pentagon. Part of this has to do with the distortions that are caused by grad school. But another big piece of this is the timeline of the federal budget. But that's an issue for another day. For now, watch this video to get ready for one of the ploys that the operators love to play on new analysts.